My name is Daisy, and at 34 years old, I never imagined I'd be staring at a text from my brother that would shatter my entire world. It was late evening in my kitchen, kids asleep upstairs, when Jake's message lit up my phone. "Your husband offered me money to keep quiet about something." My hand trembled holding that phone, but I didn't cry. No, I did something else entirely. I prepared. Nathan was in the living room watching TV, completely unaware that his carefully constructed lies were about to collapse. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Please like and subscribe if you've ever discovered a betrayal that changed everything. Because what my brother told me that night didn't just end my marriage, it revealed a web of deception so intricate that even now, a year later, I'm still uncovering pieces of the truth. For 12 years, Nathan and I had what everyone in suburban Denver called the perfect marriage. He was the successful real estate developer who coached our daughter's soccer teams on weekends. I was the devoted wife who hosted dinner parties in our 5-bedroom colonial home, where Emma, our 10-year-old, practiced piano in the sunroom, and Sophie ate painted masterpieces that covered our refrigerator. Nathan had this way of commanding a room when he entered it. 6 feet 2 inches tall, with salt and pepper hair that he kept perfectly styled, he dressed in tailored suits that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. At charity galas, women would whisper how lucky I was. At business dinners, his partners praised his brilliant mind for deals. Our neighbors saw us as the couple who had it all figured out. Jake, my younger brother by 5 years, had always been different from Nathan's polished world. While Nathan built real estate empires, Jake painted abstract art in cramped studios. While Nathan networked at country clubs, Jake performed spoken-word poetry in coffee shops. They were oil and water from the day they met, but I thought it was just personality differences. 3 months before that text, Jake had shown up at our door with 2 suitcases and that familiar sheepish grin. His latest relationship had imploded, his studio lease had ended, and he needed a place to crash. Nathan's jaw had tightened when I suggested the guest house, but he'd forced a smile and said, "Family helps family." Looking back, that forced smile should have been my first real warning. Jake settled into the guest house above our garage, a cozy space with its own entrance that I decorated with warm colors and comfortable furniture. He kept to himself, mostly painting during the day, while we were at work and school, joining us for dinner maybe twice a week. But Nathan's coldness toward him grew more obvious with each passing day. The comments started small. Nathan would mention how some people never grow up, never take responsibility, always expect others to bail them out. He'd say it while Jake was at the table, not looking at him directly, but making sure the message landed. When Jake sold a painting for $2,000 and celebrated with us over dinner, Nathan remarked that real success meant consistent income, not occasional windfalls. Meanwhile, other things had started shifting in our marriage. Nathan's business trips increased from once a month to every other week. His phone, which used to lie carelessly on counters, now never left his pocket. The home office that had always been our shared space suddenly needed a new lock for confidential deals. When I questioned any of it, he'd pull me close, kiss my forehead, and tell me the market was competitive, that he was doing this for our future. The late nights became routine. He'd come home at 11, sometimes midnight, claiming client dinners ran long or negotiations hit snags. His clothes would smell like cologne I didn't recognize, but when I mentioned it, he laughed and said the new assistant had terrible taste in air fresheners. The credit card statements showed charges at restaurants I'd never heard of, but he explained them away as business expenses that would be reimbursed. Our joint savings account had unexplained withdrawals, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. When I asked, Nathan showed me spreadsheets about investment opportunities, talking fast about returns and portfolios, until my eyes glazed over. He knew I'd never been good with complex finances, had always trusted him to handle our wealth. That trust, I would learn, was my biggest mistake. The day before Jake's text, something shifted. Nathan came home early, which never happened anymore. He was jumpy, checking his phone, constantly pacing the kitchen while I cooked dinner. When Jake knocked to return a borrowed tool, Nathan practically slammed the door in his face. That night, over pasta that Nathan barely touched, he suggested maybe Jake had been with us long enough that it was time for him to find his own place. I defended my brother, said he wasn't hurting anyone, that the guest house was separate anyway. Nathan's face darkened in a way I'd never seen before. He said I didn't understand the position Jake put us in, that having a failed artist mooching off us reflected poorly on his business reputation. The word mooching stung because it was so unlike Nathan to be cruel about family. We went to bed in silence that night, Nathan turning away from me, building a wall of cold shoulder between us. I lay awake wondering when the man I'd married had become this stranger who calculated the value of family members like property investments. The next day he left before sunrise for another business trip, kissing my cheek so lightly I barely felt it. Then came Jake's text that evening, those capital letters screaming from my phone screen while I stood in the kitchen I'd renovated with such love just 2 years ago, thinking we were building our forever home. 20 minutes after that text, Jake's knock on the back door was so quiet, I almost missed it. He stood there in the porch light, looking like he'd aged 5 years since morning, his usually bright eyes shadowed with something between guilt and fear. I pulled him inside, poured us both generous glasses of the expensive Malbec that Nathan kept for special clients, and we sat at my kitchen island like we had as kids when we'd sneak midnight snacks. Jake's hands shook as he lifted the wine glass. He started to speak 3 times before the words finally came. He'd been at Rossetti's, that upscale Italian place downtown, meeting a potential buyer for his latest series. He was early sitting at the bar when he spotted Nathan in a corner booth. The restaurant lighting was dim, romantic, the kind of place you take someone when you're trying to impress or seduce. The woman with Nathan was everything I wasn't. 20-something, maybe 25 at most, with platinum blonde hair that fell in perfect waves past her shoulders. She wore a red dress that hugged her figure designer heels that probably cost more than Jake's monthly rent anywhere else. But what made Jake's stomach drop wasn't her youth or beauty, it was the unmistakable curve of her pregnant belly and the way Nathan's hand rested on it with ownership. Jake recognized her immediately as Ashley Morrison, Nathan's former secretary from 3 years ago. She'd left suddenly for what Nathan told me was a better opportunity in California. Except here, she was very much not in California, very pregnant, and wearing a diamond bracelet that matched the one Nathan claimed was stolen from his car last month. Jake had tried to leave unnoticed, but Ashley spotted him when she got up to use the restroom. The recognition in her eyes turned to panic. She must have said something to Nathan, because within minutes my husband was at Jake's bar stool, gripped tight on his shoulder, steering him outside with practiced authority. In the alley beside Rossetti's, Nathan's mask finally slipped completely. Gone was the polished businessman, the loving brother-in-law, the community leader. In his place stood someone Jake had never seen, someone whose eyes held the kind of coldness you see in nature documentaries about predators. Nathan didn't waste time with pleasantries or explanations. $50,000. That was the number Nathan threw out like he was buying a used car. $50,000 to forget what Jake saw, to move out immediately, to never speak to me about Ashley or the baby. When Jake laughed, thinking it was some sick joke, Nathan grabbed his collar and spelled out exactly how he could destroy Jake's art career with a few phone calls. How he could ensure Jake never sold another painting, never got another gallery showing, never received another grant. But Nathan didn't stop there. He mentioned the family trust our parents had left the one I managed as the older sibling. He suggested that certain financial irregularities might come to light, irregularities that would point directly at Jake. Forged signatures on withdrawal slips, suspicious transfers to accounts in Jake's name. Nathan had been planning this for months, creating a paper trail that would destroy Jake if he ever became a problem. Jake pulled out his phone and showed me the recording he'd managed to capture. Nathan's voice clear and threatening, laying out the terms of silence. But there was more in the recording details Nathan let slip in his arrogance. Ashley's pregnancy was planned. The baby was due in 3 months. Nathan intended to divorce me after the birth had been systematically moving assets for over a year. The business trips weren't about business at all. The timeline Jake pieced together made me physically sick. The affair had started when Sophie was just 5 years old, when I was dealing with postpartum anxiety, when Nathan held me at night and promised we'd get through it together. Every family vacation where Nathan had to step away for urgent calls every weekend, he missed for critical meetings every night, he came home late with excuses about difficult clients, it was all Ashley. Jake showed me photos he'd managed to take before Nathan confronted him. Ashley's left hand sporting an engagement ring, the two of them kissing over champagne, Nathan's wedding ring, nowhere to be seen. The metadata on similar photos Jake found on social media placed them at restaurants, resorts, even the cabin in Aspen that Nathan told me he'd sold last year to a client from Texas. The worst part was the casual cruelty of it all. While I was driving Emma to violin lessons and helping Sophie with homework, while I was maintaining our home and hosting his business dinners, while I was being the perfect wife he'd molded me into, Nathan was building an entirely separate life. He'd even purchased a condo for Ashley 18 months ago, a luxury unit in the building he'd developed, the one he'd named after our daughters. Jake's voice cracked as he apologized for being the messenger, for not seeing it sooner, for considering taking the money for even a moment. But I wasn't angry at Jake. As I sat there absorbing the magnitude of Nathan's betrayal, something cold and clear crystallized in my mind. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't rage. I wouldn't confront Nathan in a storm of emotion he could manipulate. Instead, I thanked Jake, calmly told him to go home to the guest house to act normal if Nathan contacted him again. I needed time to think, to plan, to gather everything I would need. Jake hugged me at the door, the kind of desperate hug you give someone at a funeral, and I realized that's what this was, the death of the life I thought I had. After he left, I sat alone in my kitchen, the one I'd picked every tile and fixture for, and began to see the last 3 years differently. Every sign I'd ignored, every instinct I'd suppressed, every moment I'd chosen trust over suspicion. Nathan had counted on that trust, had weaponized my faith in our marriage against me. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me, confused my kindness for weakness, my trust for stupidity. That night played out like a choreographed dance I'd performed 1,000 times before. Nathan called at 7 to say his flight was delayed, that he'd be home late, not to wait up. His voice held that practiced warmth he'd perfected, the tone that used to make me feel loved, but now sounded like a salesman working a mark. I told him I loved him to travel safe, my own voice so normal that I impressed myself. Emma bounded into the kitchen, needing help with her science project about ecosystems. We built a diorama together, laughing as Sophie contributed artistic touches that turned our scientific model into what she called a fairy forest. We ate dinner together, just the three of us, and I memorized their faces, their laughs, their innocent joy that I would protect at any cost. After tucking them in, reading Sophie her favorite story about brave princesses who saved themselves, and listening to Emma practice her presentation one more time, I stood in the hallway between their rooms and made a promise. They would never feel the earthquake that was about to hit our family. I would be their stable ground. Nathan arrived home just after midnight, sliding into bed with practiced stealth. He smelled like airport and something else, perfume probably, Ashley's perfume. I controlled my breathing, kept my body relaxed, played the sleeping wife perfectly. He was snoring within minutes, secure in his deception, confident in my ignorance. At 2 a.m, I slipped out of bed and padded to his home office. The lock he'd installed was electronic, opened with a code he didn't know I'd watched him enter dozens of times. Inside, his sanctuary of mahogany and leather held more secrets than I'd imagined possible. I started with his laptop, the one he thought was password protected, but hadn't counted on me knowing his patterns. The second email account was under a name I didn't recognize, NR Boulder 2019, at a domain I'd never seen. The inbox contained 2 years of correspondence with Ashley, hundreds of emails that chronicled not just an affair, but a complete parallel relationship. Love letters where he called her his real wife, his true partner, his future. Plans for the baby, a boy they'd already named Nicholas. Promises about the life they'd build after he freed himself from me. The financial documents were in a locked drawer that opened with the same key he used for his briefcase. Bank statements for accounts I'd never known existed, showing systematic transfers from our joint holdings into separate funds. Property deeds for not just Ashley's condo, but 2 other investment properties purchased in the last year, all in shell company names. Receipts for jewelry, furniture, even a car, a white Mercedes registered in Ashley's name. His calendar synced across devices showed the real pattern of his travel. Business trips aligned perfectly with Ashley's social media posts from Vegas, Miami, New York. The conference in Chicago last month was actually a baby moon in Maui. The client emergency in Phoenix was Ashley's baby shower, where Nathan appeared in photos as the proud father to be no wedding ring in sight. I photographed everything, uploaded it all to 3 different cloud services, emailed copies to an account I created on the spot. Then I found the legal documents that made my blood run ice cold. Divorce papers already drawn up, dated for 3 months from now. Custody arrangements that painted me as unstable, citing treatment for postpartum anxiety as evidence of mental health issues. Financial disclosures that hid millions in assets, making it appear he earned far less than reality. The prenuptial agreement file contained 2 versions, the one I'd signed 12 years ago, and another with alterations, forged signatures, making it seem I'd agreed to terms that would leave me with almost nothing. He'd been planning this for so long, so methodically, that it took my breath away. This wasn't just betrayal, it was an orchestrated destruction of my life. By 4 a.m, I had everything documented. I carefully returned each item to its exact position, locked the office, and slipped back into bed. Nathan stirred, pulled me close in his sleep, and I let him playing the role of loving wife one more time while my mind raced with plans. The next morning was Saturday. Nathan woke late, kissing my forehead before heading to his supposed golf game that I now knew was actually time with Ashley. I made pancakes for the girls, their favorite Saturday tradition, while secretly texting Laura, my college roommate who'd become one of Colorado's most successful divorce attorneys. Her response was immediate: "Meet Monday morning, bring everything." I spent the weekend in a performance worthy of an Oscar. Family movie night where I cuddled against Nathan on the couch. Sunday dinner at his parents' house where I smiled and listened to his mother praise what a wonderful provider her son was, all while building my team through encrypted messages. Laura recommended a private investigator, a former FBI agent named Marcus, who specialized in financial fraud. She knew a forensic accountant who could unravel the most complex asset hiding schemes. She had connections to therapists who could testify about the girls' best interests. Sunday night, Nathan made love to me, whispering how much he loved me, how lucky he was to have me. I responded like I always had while thinking about the pregnancy photos of Ashley on his secret phone, the ones where he cradled her belly with more tenderness than he'd shown me in years. Afterward, as he slept satisfied beside me, I stared at the ceiling and planned his downfall. Monday morning arrived with Nathan leaving early for the office, kissing me goodbye with lips that had kissed Ashley 12 hours earlier, according to the GPS tracker I'd placed in his car. The moment his car turned the corner, I was on the phone with my team setting everything in motion. Marcus, the private investigator, exceeded every expectation within 48 hours. His preliminary report read like a screenplay about a man I'd never actually known. Nathan's history of deception went back further than our marriage, further than I could have imagined. The successful businessman persona he'd presented when we met 15 years ago was built on a foundation of lies so elaborate it took my breath away. There had been a first wife Jennifer married when Nathan was 25, divorced by 28. She lived in Seattle, now had changed her name, wanted nothing to do with anything related to Nathan Richards. But Marcus convinced her to talk, and her story chilled me to my bones. The same pattern, the systematic financial abuse, the calculated emotional manipulation, the secret affairs, the attempted destruction of her reputation when she tried to leave. Jennifer had been pregnant when Nathan left her for another woman. That child, a son named David, was now 17, living with his mother, had never met his father. Nathan had fought paying child support so viciously that Jennifer had eventually agreed to forfeit it just to be free of him. She'd rebuilt her life from nothing, warning me through Marcus to document everything to protect myself in ways she hadn't known to do. The pattern was clear once Marcus laid it out. Nathan targeted women with family money or trust funds. He married them, gained access to their assets, then systematically drained them while building his real estate empire. I was the third wife, though, legally the second since one marriage had been annulled after the woman's family discovered the fraud in time. Each relationship funded the next level of his business growth. Ashley wasn't his first pregnant mistress either. There had been Miranda 4 years before Ashley paid $100,000 to disappear when she was 6 months pregnant. That child, a daughter, lived in Portland with her mother, who'd signed a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for the payoff. Miranda had been 22 when Nathan, then 41, had pursued her. The same pattern, the same promises, the same devastating ending. The financial investigation revealed Nathan's real business model. He wasn't just a successful developer, he was a systematic criminal. The properties he developed were funded through elaborate fraud schemes, using one project's funds to float another moving money through shell companies incorporated in Delaware and Nevada. He'd been embezzling from joint ventures, skimming from construction budgets, inflating costs to pocket the differences. My family's money had been the seed capital for his biggest successes. The inheritance from my grandmother, the trust fund my parents had carefully built, the investment account my grandfather had started when I was born, Nathan had touched it all. Through forged signatures and manipulated documents, he'd drained nearly $2 million over the last decade, always replacing just enough to keep me from noticing during our casual monthly reviews. Jake's name appeared in several fraudulent documents, transfers authorized with his forged signature loans, taken against his future inheritance from our parents' estate. Nathan had been setting up Jake as a fall guy for over a year, creating a trail that would implicate my brother in embezzlement if anyone ever investigated. The cruelty of it, targeting the brother he knew I loved, using my family bonds as weapons against me, revealed a calculated evil I couldn't have imagined. But Nathan had made mistakes in his arrogance. He'd gotten sloppy with the Ashley situation, too confident in his control over me. The condo he'd bought her was titled, incorrectly making it a marital asset. The Mercedes was purchased with funds directly traceable to our joint account. The jewelry he'd bought her, some of it was actually pieces he'd reported stolen for insurance fraud. Marcus also discovered Nathan's leverage over his business partners. He had dirt on everyone, photographs of affairs, evidence of their own financial improprieties, records of bribes to city officials. He'd built a network of mutual destruction, ensuring silence through carefully balanced blackmail. But 3 of those partners were ready to flip their own legal troubles mounting, willing to testify against Nathan in exchange for lesser consequences. The meeting with Nathan's mother revealed another layer of deception. She knew about Jennifer, had helped Nathan hide that marriage from me. She knew about the mistresses, had even met Ashley, had been shopping for baby clothes with her while I thought she was at her book club. The woman who'd sat at my dinner table for 12 years, who'd held my daughters as infants, who'd called me the daughter she'd never had, she'd been Nathan's accomplice all along. When I confronted her privately, recording the conversation with Laura's guidance, she didn't even pretend remorse. She said Nathan deserved a son to carry on his legacy, that Ashley could give him that. She said I'd been a good investment, my family money and connections had been useful, but it was time for Nathan to move on to his real family. The casual cruelty of her words, the way she discussed my life like a business transaction, showed me where Nathan had learned his methods. My forensic accountant, David Chen, worked 18-hour days untangling Nathan's financial web. Every thread he pulled revealed another hidden asset, another scheme, another victim. The total theft from various sources exceeded $8 million. The IRS would be very interested in Nathan's creative tax strategies. The FBI would want to know about the interstate wire fraud. The state attorney general would have questions about the construction bid rigging. By the end of the first week, I had a legal case that would not just divorce Nathan, but destroy him. Laura assembled a team of 8 attorneys, each specializing in different aspects of the case: divorce, criminal, civil custody, financial fraud, asset recovery, even immigration, since some of Nathan's money had been laundered through foreign accounts. We met in a conference room that felt like a war room, maps of Nathan's empire spread across the table, ready to dismantle it piece by piece. The custody evaluation started immediately. The psychologist interviewed the girls carefully, never revealing the true purpose, just assessing their bonds and stability. Both children were clearly more attached to me, their primary caregiver, since birth. Nathan's absence from their daily lives was documented thoroughly: every missed recital, every forgotten birthday, every broken promise, cataloged as evidence. Meanwhile, I maintained my performance at home. Nathan noticed nothing too wrapped up in his excitement about the coming baby. He'd grown careless, taking calls from Ashley in the house, barely covering the speaker. He'd stopped hiding receipts, leaving evidence of their relationship scattered in his pockets. The man who'd been so calculated for years was finally making mistakes, drunk on his approaching freedom. The strategy meeting with my legal team felt like planning a military operation. Laura laid out the approach with precision that reminded me why she'd never lost a high-stakes divorce case. We would file everything simultaneously: divorce papers, emergency custody orders, asset freezes, criminal complaints, civil lawsuits. Nathan wouldn't have time to react, to hide assets, to craft counter-narratives. The timing had to be perfect. Nathan's parents were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary in 2 weeks, a massive party at the country club with over 200 guests. Nathan was giving the main toast a speech about family values and the importance of commitment. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. That would be our moment public enough that he couldn't spin the story documented enough that his reputation would crumble instantly. I spent those 2 weeks gathering the final pieces, installing legal surveillance in our home cameras that would record his threats when he discovered I knew, opening new bank accounts in my name, only slowly moving money I was entitled to into protected spaces, securing the girls' college funds in trusts Nathan couldn't touch, copying every document in our home safe, including the real estate deeds he thought I didn't understand. Ashley, meanwhile, was growing impatient. Her social media posts became more bold, showing the nursery Nathan had funded, the designer maternity clothes he'd bought, the push presents he'd already selected. She'd started telling people Nathan was her boyfriend, that he was leaving his wife soon. Her indiscretion was beautiful to watch, each post another nail in Nathan's coffin. 3 days before the anniversary party, Jake played his role perfectly. He met Nathan for the payoff wearing a wire provided by Marcus. Nathan handed over $50,000 in cash, repeating his threats, adding new ones about what would happen if Jake ever spoke up. He admitted to the affair, to the baby, to his plans for divorce. He even bragged about how stupid I was, how easily manipulated, how he'd been bleeding my family dry for years. Every word recorded in crystal clear audio. The night before the party, Nathan was nervous, but attributed it to his speech. He practiced in front of the mirror, talking about his parents' inspiring marriage, their dedication to family, their values that he'd carried forward. I helped him with his bow tie, kissed him for luck, told him his parents would be so proud. He held me close, said, after tomorrow, things would be different, that we'd start fresh. He had no idea how right he was. The day of the party, I dressed carefully in the elegant navy dress Nathan had bought me for Christmas, the one he'd said made me look like the perfect wife. The girls wore matching pink dresses, their hair in French braids I'd done myself. We looked like the ideal family as we walked into that country club ballroom, Nathan's hand possessively on my lower back, the girls flanking us like accessories to his success. The room was filled with everyone who mattered in Nathan's world. Business partners, city councilmen, judges. He golfed with developers. He competed against society wives who organized charity galas. His parents stood at the center, his mother in diamonds Nathan had bought with my grandmother's money, his father proud of the son who'd exceeded his expectations. Nathan began his speech at 8 o'clock, exactly standing at the microphone with the confidence of a man who believed his own lies. He talked about watching his parents' marriage, learning about commitment, about sacrifice, about putting family first. The crowd was mesmerized by his charisma, his ability to command attention. I stood at our table, the girls beside me playing the proud wife one last time. Then Ashley walked in. She wasn't supposed to be there, but her impatience had reached a breaking point. 7 months pregnant, wearing a white dress that emphasized her condition, she walked straight toward Nathan. The room fell silent. 200 people suddenly aware that something unscripted was happening. Nathan's face went white, his hands gripping the podium. But before Ashley could speak, I stood up. My voice carried across the silent room as I said 5 words that changed everything. "Nathan, is this your mistress?" It wasn't a question despite the phrasing. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan tried to recover, started to speak, but I held up my phone and pressed play. His voice filled the ballroom through the speakers I'd arranged to patch into his threats to Jake, his admissions about Ashley, his bragging about stealing from my family. The recording played for exactly 90 seconds, enough to destroy him, but not enough to traumatize my daughters, who Laura's assistant had quietly escorted out during the chaos. Ashley, realizing she'd walked into something bigger, tried to leave, but then her voice came through the speakers too, messages she'd sent Nathan about their future, their son, their plans to take everything from me. The crowd was frozen, watching a tragedy unfold in real time. Nathan's business partners stood up from their table. One of them, Thomas, walked forward with an envelope. Lawsuit papers served publicly accusations of embezzlement and fraud. Then another partner, then another, each serving him with different papers. The FBI agents Marcus had alerted waited by the exit, ready to question Nathan about the financial crimes. Nathan's mother started screaming, calling me a liar, saying I'd fabricated everything. So I played her voice too, her admission that she'd known everything, her statement that I'd been a good investment. But it was time for Nathan to move on. Her husband, Nathan's father, stared at her like he'd never seen her before. Their golden anniversary became the night their family imploded. Nathan tried to run, actually tried to physically flee the ballroom, but hotel security blocked him on Laura's pre-arranged signal. He turned back to me, his face contorted with rage, and in front of everyone who'd ever mattered to him, he showed his true self. The threats poured out what he'd do to me, to Jake, to anyone who stood with us. Every word recorded by multiple phones, witnessed by hundreds. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Nathan was arrested that night on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and making criminal threats. The image of him being led away in handcuffs from his parents' anniversary party made the front page of 3 newspapers. His bail was set at $2 million, which he couldn't access because we'd frozen all the assets. His mother put up her house, the one bought with stolen money, to get him out. Ashley disappeared within 24 hours, her condo emptied, her social media deleted. But she couldn't hide from legal service. The lawsuit naming her as complicit in the fraud found her at her parents' house in Michigan. The Mercedes was repossessed. The jewelry was claimed as marital assets. The nursery she'd photographed so proudly would never hold Nathan's son. My daughters were my primary concern. I'd arranged for them to stay with my parents during the immediate aftermath, protected from the media attention and the social fallout. The therapist worked with them daily, helping them process why Daddy wasn't coming home, why kids at school were saying things, why our life had changed so suddenly. Their resilience amazed me, especially Emma, who told me she'd known something was wrong, that Daddy hadn't been happy, that maybe now we could be happy without pretending. The legal victories came in rapid succession. Emergency full custody granted based on Nathan's threats and criminal charges. The house secured as my separate property since it had been purchased primarily with my inheritance. Assets totaling $4 million recovered and placed in protected trusts. Nathan's access to any marital funds suspended pending the criminal investigation. Nathan's business empire crumbled within a month. Partners pulled out projects, stalled loans were called in. The properties he'd leveraged against each other collapsed like dominoes, when one missed payment triggered a cascade of defaults. His reputation, built over 15 years, was destroyed in 15 days. No one would take his calls. His country club revoked his membership. His law firm dropped him as a client. Jake was completely vindicated. The forensic evidence proved every signature was forged, every transaction fraudulent. He received a settlement from Nathan's insurance for defamation and emotional distress. But more importantly, our bond as siblings grew stronger than ever. Jake moved into a proper apartment near us, became the uncle my daughters needed, the stable male figure in their lives. The discovery of Nathan's other victims led to a support group forming. Jennifer flew in from Seattle, Miranda from Portland, 2 other women I hadn't known about from Dallas and Boston. We sat in my living room sharing stories, finding patterns, healing together. These women weren't just victims, they were survivors who'd rebuilt their lives, and they showed me it was possible. 3 months after the anniversary party, Nathan was convicted on 8 counts of fraud. The federal charges were still pending, but the state conviction alone meant 5 years in prison. At sentencing, he tried to play the victim, claiming I'd entrapped him, that I'd destroyed his life out of jealousy. The judge, a woman who'd seen too many men like Nathan, gave him the maximum sentence and recommended no early parole. Ashley had her baby while Nathan was in county jail, awaiting transfer to state prison. A boy as they'd planned, but Nathan wasn't there to see him born. Ashley's parents raised the child wanting nothing to do with Nathan. The son he'd destroyed our family for would grow up without knowing him, probably better for it. My business began 6 months after everything exploded. Using the recovered funds and my own skills I'd let atrophy during the marriage, I started a consulting firm for women facing similar situations. We provided resources, connected them with lawyers and investigators, helped them document abuse and fraud, guided them through the legal system. Within a year, we'd helped 50 women escape marriages that mirrored mine. The girls thrived without Nathan's toxic presence. Emma's anxiety decreased, her grades improved. She smiled more. Sophie's art became less dark, more colorful, filled with hope instead of hidden sadness. They visited Nathan once in prison, a supervised meeting where he tried to manipulate them into believing I was the villain. They saw through it immediately. Emma told him they were happier without him. Sophie didn't speak at all. They never asked to visit again. Nathan's mother tried to maintain contact, claiming grandparent rights. But when the court reviewed her involvement in Nathan's crimes, her knowledge of the fraud and affairs, her active participation in deceiving me, they denied her any access to the girls. She moved to Florida to live with her sister, abandoned by the society friends who'd discovered her role in everything. Nathan's father divorced her, horrified by the woman he'd been married to for 50 years. A year after that text from Jake, I stood in my kitchen again, the same spot where this journey had begun. But everything was different now. The girls were laughing in the backyard with Jake painting a mural on the guest house wall. My business was thriving, helping women across 3 states. The house felt like home again, no longer a stage for Nathan's performance, but a genuine sanctuary for our real family. Dating wasn't on my radar yet, might not be for years. Trust would take time to rebuild. But I'd learned to trust myself again, to value my instincts, to never again silence the voice that whispered, "Something's wrong." I'd learned that strength wasn't about enduring abuse, but about taking action. That protecting your children sometimes means destroying their father. That family isn't about blood, but about loyalty. 1 year later, I sat at the same kitchen island where Jake had revealed the truth, but this morning felt different. Sunlight streamed through windows I'd replaced, removing the ones Nathan had chosen, erasing his aesthetic from my space. The girls were making breakfast, Emma scrambling eggs, while Sophie set the table with mismatched plates she'd painted herself. Jake was coming for Sunday brunch, a tradition we'd started that replaced Nathan's formal dinners. The healing journey hadn't been linear. There were nights I'd wake up panicked, wondering if I'd imagined it all, if Nathan would be beside me with that practiced smile. Therapy helped twice a week at first, then weekly, now monthly maintenance to process the trauma. The therapist specialized in survivors of narcissistic abuse, helped me understand how Nathan had systematically eroded my reality until I doubted my own perceptions. My support group met every Tuesday evening in the conference room of my new office. 50 members had grown to 200, then split into multiple groups across the city. Women drove from hours away to attend, finding solidarity in shared experiences. We developed a handbook for recognizing financial abuse, distributed it free to women's shelters and legal aid societies. 3 state legislators had contacted us about drafting better protective laws. The business had evolved beyond consulting. We now offered full-service support from initial documentation through court proceedings to rebuilding afterward. I'd hired Jennifer, Nathan's first wife, as our financial forensics specialist. Her experience and expertise had saved dozens of women from Nathan-style destruction. Miranda handled our childcare during meetings, understanding how impossible it was to plan your escape while managing children. Jake's art career had exploded after the publicity. His series about family betrayal and redemption sold out at galleries in Denver, Santa Fe, and San Francisco. He donated 30% of sales to our organization funding legal services for women who couldn't afford them. His guest house studio had become a haven for my daughters, who spent hours creating with their uncle, processing their emotions through art. Emma had started a journal, encouraged by her therapist, documenting her feelings about Nathan. Some entries were angry, some sad, some surprisingly mature in their understanding that Nathan was sick in ways that couldn't be fixed. She'd written him one letter in prison, telling him she forgave him, but didn't want him in her life. He'd never responded, probably couldn't face the mirror she held up. Sophie had stopped mentioning Nathan entirely. To her, he'd become a story character, someone who existed once but didn't anymore. Her teachers said she was thriving, her confidence blooming without his critical presence. She'd started dance classes, something Nathan had deemed frivolous, and performed in her first recital with joy that brought tears to my eyes. The financial recovery was complete. Every stolen dollar had been traced and recovered through criminal restitution and civil judgments. The properties Nathan had bought with my family's money were sold proceeds placed in trusts for the girls' futures. I'd kept only the family home renovated, it completely erasing Nathan's influence from every room. It was ours now, truly ours, filled with laughter instead of lies. Ashley had reached out once through a lawyer seeking child support for her son. The irony was sharp, the woman who'd helped destroy my family, now needing help from it. But I'd learned something about breaking cycles. That child was innocent, my daughter's half-brother, deserving of support regardless of his origins. We established a trust for him managed by a third party, ensuring his needs were met without enabling Ashley. Nathan's letters from prison went straight to Laura's office unread. He'd attempted contact 27 times, alternating between rage, self-pity, and manipulation. Laura summarized them for legal records, but I never read a word. That chapter was closed, sealed, burned. He had 3 more years to serve, would emerge to nothing. No family, no fortune, no future in the world he'd once dominated. The anniversary party venue, that country club ballroom, had become something of a legend in Denver society. The night Nathan Richards fell became shorthand for spectacular public downfall. His parents' marriage had ended in bitter divorce, his father discovering decades of his mother's deceptions. She lived alone in Florida, now sending birthday cards to the girls that went straight to recycling, maintaining her delusion that she was the victim. My parents had moved closer, buying a house 3 blocks away, becoming the grandparents my girls deserved. They attended every recital, every soccer game, every art show. My father had taken over the male mentoring. Nathan never provided teaching them about respect, integrity, and real love. My mother helped them understand that strength wasn't about never falling, but about how you rise. The real triumph wasn't the legal victories or the financial recovery. It was smaller moments. Emma laughing freely without checking if it was too loud. Sophie painting without worrying about making a mess. Jake feeling safe in our home. My own ability to make decisions without second-guessing, to trust my judgment, to know my worth, beyond being someone's wife. I'd started dating cautiously a fellow single parent I'd met at Emma's school. He was everything Nathan wasn't: quiet, genuine, present. He understood my walls didn't push earned trust through consistent small actions rather than grand gestures. The girls liked him but weren't ready for more, and he respected that. Maybe something would develop. Maybe not. But I was choosing for myself now. The business expanded to include prevention education. We partnered with colleges to teach young women about financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and the red flags hidden in romantic gestures. I spoke at conferences, sharing our story, watching recognition dawn in faces of women who'd thought they were alone. Each woman who left safely was a victory. Each child protected from a toxic parent was worth everything we'd endured. Some nights I stood in my kitchen and remembered that text from Jake. How my hands had shaken, but my mind had sharpened. How I'd chosen strategy over hysteria. How that moment of devastating truth had become the first step toward freedom. I'd thought Nathan was destroying me, but he'd actually freed me from a prison I hadn't known I was in. The girls and I had developed new traditions. Pizza Fridays where we made our own each with different toppings. Saturday adventures, exploring Colorado. Hiking trails Nathan had deemed too messy. Sunday brunches with Jake where we played board games and told stories. Holiday celebrations that were chaotic and imperfect and absolutely perfect in their imperfection. The lesson I shared with every woman who walked through our doors was simple but profound. Your gut knows. That voice whispering something's wrong isn't anxiety, it's wisdom. The signs you're ignoring aren't coincidences, they're evidence. The person making you feel crazy might be the one who's actually insane. Trust yourself, document everything, build your team, and when the moment comes, don't hesitate. Nathan had thought he was the powerful one, the one with connections and resources and cunning. But real power wasn't about controlling others, it was about refusing to be controlled. Real strength wasn't about never showing weakness, it was about being vulnerable with the right people. Real family wasn't about blood or law, it was about choosing each other every single day. As Jake arrived for brunch, hugging his nieces, complimenting their cooking, I felt the kind of peace I'd never known during my marriage. This was what family really looked like: messy, loud, imperfect, real. Nathan had tried to steal this from us, but he'd failed. We'd survived him, thrived, despite him built something beautiful from the wreckage he'd created. The text that had shattered my world had actually saved it. Jake's courage in telling the truth despite Nathan's threats had given us all freedom. Sometimes the worst moment of your life becomes the turning point toward your best life. Sometimes betrayal reveals your strength. Sometimes losing everything shows you what really matters. I want to ask you something. Have you ever ignored your instincts in a relationship? What signs did you miss that seem obvious now? Share your story in the comments below, because your experience might be the warning someone else needs to hear. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and triumph. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they're stronger than they know, that there's life after betrayal, that sometimes the end is actually the beginning. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your gut knows, trust it, act on it, and never let anyone convince you that your truth isn't real.